Welcome back to the Perfect Lab Podcast. I'm Mark Jager. This is Mark Kilgore. He goes by Kilgore. I go by Jager. And today we're going to recap Kilgore's experience at TT Nationals. All right, Kilgore, kick us off here. Get us started. So you went to essentially the big dog TT Nationals. They had 196 participants at this event, which is absolutely astounding for a time attack, like time trials, like crazy number. They had a wild setup. It was like 4 days of fury in terms of like going on track. They were going to split it up between east and west, and you know, it's not like your typical situation of time attack where you go out and just run your fastest lap. They were also looking at consistency aspects where they basically had you in a situation where you had to, you know, put down a time on this day, put down a time on this day, and then you have to average those out, and that's who actually creates the winners. And that's kind of a little bit of a prelude to what we're going to talk about this later when we talk about record setters versus winners. So just again to give you a prequel there. But all right, Kilgore, you took the BMW out, and
sure did.
Tell me a little bit about it. Tell me what you had to do to prepare for this event, as well as, you know, just get yourself ready to go.
Yeah, so it was a good event overall. Had a really good time. If you've listened at all to this, you'll probably know that my BMW is set up mostly to the rule set of Grid Life Street GT. Grid Life Street GT allows for a little more modification to the car than the tuner class that I run in. So the car came back from Laguna, and it arrived back in Cincinnati with Turn-In Concepts. I had those guys do a little bit of work on it. I actually ended up, because of some other things we were trying to do, we were trying to fix my axle, if anybody heard about that on the last episode. I had an axle boot that was giving us some issues, which actually ended up causing some major but easily fixable problems at Time Trial Nationals. But anyway, so we had this little boot issue on my axle. The rear right boot axle was causing some problems at Laguna. We were trying to figure out what to do about that while the car was in Cincinnati at Turn-In Concepts. While we were trying to figure that out, and I didn't have the car in my possession, I said, well, I need to change out all of the control arms. And when I say all, I mean all of the control arms. What ended up happening is I had all of the fronts. For the rears, I actually, so I didn't have a full set of rear control arms. So I actually ordered a used set of control arms from, and man, I hate that I cannot think of what their name is, but they are like a BMW recycle shop out in California. They do a lot. Gosh, anyway.
You have to get them out of California so they're not all rusted and tore up.
Exactly. They actually they came off of I think like a 2019 BMW M4 CS, which I think only had like 16,000 miles on the car before it got hit and was totaled. And so these guys get the cars, they part them out. But anyway, had new used control arms for the rear shipped to Cincinnati. I shipped my fronts to Cincinnati. They got all of those put on, and then they tried to repair the boot as best they could. So they used some tape and some zip ties to try and hold it together for this one last event. And then once I got the car back in my possession, which was like a week before the event, I had to take off the aero on the car, so I had to take off the front splitter, and then I'd take off the front wing, which was no big issue. Just check some things over, had to do an alignment on the car, but then other than that, it was pretty much ready to go. So by and large, not a lot needed to be done to the car, but if I didn't make those changes, I was going to have to run in the max class, which is a totally different league. So I didn't want to do that, so I said, you know what, I'm going to change the control arms and take off the aero so that I can run in the tuner class. And
well, that is a lot of work to be done, though. I mean, that's changing all your control arms, getting the aero off. That's a complete game changer in terms of how the car is going to handle, how's it going to handle high speed, low speed. So you as a driver now are going to have to adapt to all of that. Huge changes on the car. Now you have to bring it back home, do the alignment, do you do this alignment yourself?
I do, yeah. I do the alignment at home myself using it like a string alignment kit. But
that's always a little bit of a lengthy process, depending
yeah,
on how good or bad you are at doing it.
Yeah, and so the first thing I did was adjust the camber for the front, for the front and the rear, make sure the camber was how I wanted it, which actually I took a little bit of camber out. I don't know why. I had gone like full camber, I think for Laguna, and the car felt good. You could definitely tell a difference that the car did not quite have the direct feel, right? Like there was just a little bit of when I would turn the wheel and the car would kind of take a set. It wasn't quite as it wasn't quite as direct with the stock control arms. And let me also say that only in the front I was only able to change out one bushing to a poly bushing. All of the other bushings are rubber bushings because no one makes and I think this is what people are starting to find, at least my understanding, is that like very few people are really doing poly bushings. There are definitely some, don't get me wrong, but like there are no poly bushings for these
M4s. A lot of people doing spherical.
Yeah, you just go straight to spherical. If you've got SPL, just go straight to spherical. And so, that I think is something that is sort of needs to be accounted for in some of the rule sets that,
aftermarket support isn't there, so it makes it really hard for guys to go that route.
Sure, yeah. There is a little bit of difference, but it also allows for adjustability in the suspension, and you're not eating up tires, right? Like you can get track alignment. So I think there's a benefit, but I use a string alignment kit, and it takes some time, right, to get it dialed in. But then once you get it dialed in, it's pretty easy. Actually, that's something that I'm hoping over this winter. I'd really like to maybe upgrade that and get some like specific like alignment. They have like the little wheel, I don't know what you want to call them, dollies, I don't know, but like the wheel alignment kits where they have like high grade bearings, and then you basically just bolt that to the hub, and that allows you to like actually adjust. I know you can do it with like plates, right? Like turn plates, you could do that, but it at least makes it easier. So I may try and do some upgrades over the winter in terms of tools, because I think that's something that so many people overlook. Alignment and even corner balancing, that like people just throw on a new suspension. I'm just going to set the ride height. Yeah, the ride height's like the same at all four corners, and I'm going to call it good, right? Like you can really have a fairly substantial change in the way that the car feels and the confidence that it gives you under braking and corners that can add a second or two depending on how long the lap is. And so that's been one thing where I'm like, you know what, like this is money and cost that is going into something that is not like an immediate modification, but I need to have a properly set up car first before I start throwing money at more power or whatever, right? Like you got to make sure the car's set up well. I know you do a lot of that, Jager.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of it too, is my opinion. Now, I'm not going to lie. Back in the Subaru days, Ken Kazitz, he used to take care of me and just do all the suspension stuff, and I got definitively spoiled. After the Subaru, I basically ended up in a situation of got to learn this myself, and I kind of look back at it and I go, I wish I would have taken more interest in what Ken was doing and how he was doing it, instead of just sitting there and jaw jacking with him the entire time instead of helping him. I probably would have learned a hell of a lot more, and when I go to do my string alignments now, like you're doing, I'd probably be way more effective and efficient at it. But man, to be able to do that, to understand it, and then be able to do it on the fly and be able to understand the dynamics and be able to say, okay, I'm going to, like you said, I'm going to add more camera. I'm going to take away some camera. I'm going to test this out. I'm going to do this, that. Especially something like your play car, like for me when I have my Miata, to be able to throw different setups in there and try to see what it does, add a little toe in the rear to add more stability, give some toe out in the front, to give you quicker turn-ins, or like in your case, right? Like, oh, I got to swap a bushing because this one went bad. Oh, here, let me bust out the setup so I can check it and everything, make sure everything's still straight and good. I mean, there's tons of benefit to it, and I think that's one thing where a lot of people end up saying, like, I'm just gonna, do the shop gig, and pay people to do it for me.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of people, like, especially for HPD days and like enthusiast class ish. Like, if you're only going and doing alignment stuff once a year, yeah, let somebody else take care of it. But I guarantee you, like, you can go through and own this stuff, and it will pay back dividends. And, you know, in
Absolutely.
a pro and con way, I think I've ended up having to help other friends do their alignments now even more. So you got the car all prepped up, and, you know, you got to experience a little bit of your fun of string alignments, and, you know, just throwing it out there. Quick trick alignment setups. Heard they're pretty good.
They are. Yeah.
And so what you finally get on the road. You're doing your thing. So you get to this event.
It started off really, really, really well, I got to say.
Oh no.
No, it did. For sure. Like legitimately. This is like, it's always like encouraging, right? So the last time that I was there would have been, and so we were at NCM Motorsports Park. Go check out our last episode. It's a little long, but we had John Hunter on, or no, 2 episodes ago. We had John Hunter on, episode 5, I think it was, or 6. We had John Hunter on where we talked about all, TT Nats. We gave a lot of information, but so this was through the SCCA. It was at NCM Motorsports in Bowling Green, Kentucky. 23 turns, I think it is. I think it's like 3.1 miles. Super long track, very hard to learn. It takes you multiple events. It takes you multiple weekends to get there just to really start to understand the nuances of it, and really remember the corners and figuring out where you can push and all those sort of things. But anyway, with all that being said, first session out.
Just a little something to add. John Hunter actually said that he believed that this is the best time attack track in the U.S. So
he did.
I'll just preface it with that.
Yeah.
Okay, go on, sir. Go on.
He backed that statement up at the award ceremony, because next year they are moving the Time Trial Nationals to Pitt. And so he was giving a thanks to the NCM staff, and he backed that up, and he said, I know we're moving this, but he's like, I still think NCM is the best time trials time attack track in the country. And one day we will, coming up soon, one day we will have that discussion with me and you, Jager, but I'm looking forward to it. But so I get there and unload the car. Car's ready to go. Last year was October of 2023 when I ran, and I ended up running a best time of 2 minutes 16.8 seconds. So first practice session on Thursday. So Thursday was 2 practice sessions, and then the first, I guess, session that counts, timed session, I guess you could call it. So first session out, go out there. There's traffic, right? Like, they just sort of threw us in groups. I was actually behind AJ Hartman with his crazy winged Mustang, which was super cool to see.
You should have stole some parts off it for me.
I know. Well, yeah. Ended up setting a new personal best of a 216.4. So immediately out of the gate, I was already 4/10 faster than what I did for my best last year. The car is basically unchanged, other than I have a slightly higher tune on the car, probably somewhere around 50 more horsepower, maybe 80, somewhere like 50 to 80 more horsepower than I had last year. But to me, that's just always super encouraging when, like, the first session out there, you're already faster than you were without any major changes to the car. So
did you feel like, I'm just curious, so you hadn't been there since October, so basically like a year. Yeah. How'd you go about remembering the track? Were you doing a lot of like data review and video review prior, sim review, or just jump back out there and try to remember it?
Yeah. So I didn't do any sim work. There's not really, from what I found, there's not really a good sim that has a good accurate representation of the track. There is one, I think, maybe on Assetto Corsa, but it's not very it's at least something. But for me, right, I've been there a handful of times already. Like, I don't need to know where the track goes. I would need something that has a lot of fidelity to really get some use out of it. But the main thing I did was, I looked at my data and I just rewatched my videos and was I knew that there were already 2 spots that I think that I was slower than I should have been last year. So those were immediately turn 5 and turn 16 were immediately the 2 spots that I was like, okay, that's where I want to immediately find time. And that's where I did, right? Like just carrying more speed and being more confident through those turns.
Those 2 turns, are they like, so I don't know the track well enough to know. What kind of turns are they?
So turn 5 is a high-speed right-hand, long radius right-hand turn. And it just takes a lot of confidence building to really throw it in and know that the car is going to stick. And so you come off, and it's a pretty tricky corner because you're coming off of I'll call it a high-speed straight. And when I say it's a high-speed straight, it has a couple turns in it, but you don't lift. So I'm coming into that turn at about 130 miles an hour, and it's not a hard braking zone, right? Like it's a long right-hand sweeper. So you sort of breathe on the brakes, kind of, it's not an abrupt braking, right? Like you don't want to upset the car. So it's more of an extended long braking zone. And then you're trying to find that perfect turn-in point, and trying to carry just that right amount of speed, right? And I mean, if you're 3 miles an hour faster, 3 miles an hour slower, right? Like, to me, sometimes I have difficulty really feeling like where that is. And I think that that's where a lot of and when I say that it being the actual speed at which I'm turning in, right? So I think that that's where a lot of just the memory muscle comes in of same braking point, same braking pressure, same turn-in point should get you to the same mile an hour or close, right?
Well, and that's actually one of the hardest things to teach and to understand, when you're talking about new drivers, because a lot of times you're going to get asked the question like, okay, well, where do you brake and how do you do this and how do you make the determination on where the grip level's at? And like you said, it kind of gets into muscle memory and just the old like butt dyno aspect of it of, know that I'm going to, I'm not going to over brake. I'm going to come into this corner and I'm going to brake enough, yet I'm going to carry the speed. And you have to just say, well, you have to understand where you need to be with this car in the way that it's built and situated, that it's going to work for you. And that's a really tough, I mean, just trying to explain it to you right now, it's a difficult thing to explain. And so it makes it really, really difficult for drivers to be able to do that, and especially if you haven't been to the course, and it makes it really hard too if you haven't been to the course in a long time. You don't have a good way like to sim it or anything like that. Like you said, the best way, review your data, get an idea of what gear you need to be in, the speed approximations, and just understanding your braking points by giving yourself geographic references and so on and so forth, and then that really helps you just move it along.
So I was able to pick up if you're above 90 miles an hour, if you're above 100 miles an hour in that turn, right, like that is very good, especially in a non-aero car. So I was usually somewhere around 95 or so. So I was a little slower. And again, it's all dependent on, the risk that people are willing to take. I was always just slightly slower. We'll talk a little bit more about what I found throughout that weekend in that turn. Remind me of that in terms of slower entries, higher exits, higher entries, same exit. Well, actually, we'll just talk about it right now. Yielded very little difference. So that was something I sort of played around with, right? Like slowing down a little bit, but being able to accelerate through the corner versus having a higher entry speed and maintaining that entry speed through the corner. Ultimately ended up with very little differences in time. So that was something.
The old adage of slow in, fast out, it's so a lot of people confuse that, with, oh, well, you're just going to go too slow, so on and so forth. So a big thing that you just said, right? So I was trying to carry as much speed as physically possible into this corner, but now you're so worried and so focused on just trying
balancing
to
balance the car, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You can't get on throttle, right? You're just balancing the car.
And so what ends up generally happening is that when you look at that data trace, is you end up seeing you're balancing, and then where you normally would have got back on throttle and start accelerating and gaining that speed, now you end up waiting. It might be a small amount, but you're waiting longer periods of time before you get back on throttle. So all that you gained through the beginning, you lose on the out. And those are the little things that, like you said, it'll end up being negligible because you'll gain here, lose here, gain here. But from a repeatability fashion, from an ability to go in and have essentially, I don't want to say it in a weird way, but less stress in terms of just being able to do it again and again, you could do the slow in, fast out again and again, where the balance factor, all it's going to take is one little
It's a higher
mistake.
risk. Yeah,
Your
higher risk factor.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
And if I think the reward isn't worth it,
right,
doesn't make sense.
Exactly. And so coming out of turn 5, it's a very short straight into a hard braking zone, like 100-degree right-hander. It's actually more than a 90-degree right-hander. So if you had a long straight after that turn, you would see bigger gains on the slow in, fast out than fast entry, right? Because you'd be gaining the entire way down that straightaway. But because this was a very short, basically the end of the corner was like basically like the 4 marker for the next brake zone. So you're coming out of that and you're trying to straighten up the car just enough to then get on the brakes as hard as you can, right? Like, so again, that goes back to slow in, fast out can be true, but it also depends where the next corner is.
Exactly.
Right.
They all are linked together.
Exactly what I was about to say. They all start linking together, and you have to figure out how this corner affects the next corner. So anyway, I was able to take more speed through 5, which gave me a little bit of time, and then the other one is turn 16. So you have what I'll call a middle. You have another again sort of straightaway. It's in the middle of the track. And it's sort of weird because you have the front straight, and then you have what people would generally call the back straight because it's actually on the back side. But then there is a middle straight, which is actually in the middle of the track because the track sort of loops in on itself. So anyway, you have this sort of middle straight where you're coming out of turn 13. You're on the gas all the way through 13. You have what they refer to as tabletop. So it's actually kind of comes up. Which I think, do you guys have a tabletop out at Button Willow? Am I misremembering that?
It's something like, it's called Phil Hill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But it's an up and then a down, right?
Yep.
And so the car definitely gets loose as it comes up, and then you come back down into a compression with a left-hander, and then coming up to another fast right-hander. But that fast right-hander comes up over a crest and then falls away. So you can brake going into that hill, but again, you have to get that braking done, and you have to get it at just the right point while also releasing the brakes, because if you come up over that crest still on the brakes or carrying too much speed, and now you've got to turn right, that back end's going to be coming around. Or if you're in a front wheel car, you're going to be understeering like crazy. So that was one where I was braking earlier than I needed to, and so I ended up. It was pretty crazy. I went back and looked at my data, even just after the first session. I was carrying about 12 mile an hour faster through that little left-hand kink before the crest into the right hand. So 15 is the left-hand kink, and then you have 16, which they refer to as faux rouge, which is the up it is sort of a rising hill to a right-hander, and just carrying more speed through 15 and braking much more aggressively into 16 was netting me, ultimately was netting me a lot of mile an hour, about 12 to 15 mile an hour. And wow, that's pretty significant.
That is very significant.
Yeah. So those were the two immediate places that I gained time, and super happy about that. Now, with that being said, first practice session goes well. Second practice session, I didn't end up participating in because I had new tires, and I knew this was probably going to be an issue. They had one guy who was there doing tires on site, and so they did. No, excuse me. They had one practice session and then 2 timed sessions. I said that wrong earlier. One practice session, 2 time sessions. So everybody came, and if anybody was swapping tires, they had to do it between that practice session and timed session, because with the SCCA TT program, you can only run one set of tires the entire weekend unless you have an issue. You puncture a tire, you cord a tire, you can swap that one tire out, but you have to get it approved. You can't go to like, oh, well, I'm going to swap my 2 rear tires, right? Like,
so
nope, you can only swap.
They kind of took that rule from One Lap of America. Kind of like that.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, it took a long time, and I don't blame the guy. And again, we had 2 sessions on Thursday plus 3 sessions on Friday to set your first segment time, so I wasn't that concerned about it. Ended up missing the first timed session of Thursday, which would have been the second overall session, and then went out for my 3rd session. So, I'm sorry, I went out for the 3rd session of the day. If you're not confused yet, you will be soon enough. So it was my first time session, 2nd session of the day, and went out and got like halfway around the lap and had an issue. Which was I ended up getting a bunch of codes. I ended up getting this like chassis destabilization, ABS deactivated, differential deactivated, all sorts of stuff. And I was like, what is going on? And I had this once previously at Gingerman earlier this year. And I actually ended up ruining a set of front tires because I was like, well, this is weird. The ABS was off, and so I went charging into turn 1 and got on the brakes and absolutely locked every single tire up and corded the 2 front tires.
I was gonna say, man, as soon as you are used to having ABS on a vehicle and then ABS goes away, and the feel just isn't quite there. It's just not the same. That can do exactly what you just said.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I ended up coming in, and so what happened in Gingerman is I just turned the car off, turned it back on, all the codes went away, car was fine. So I said, okay, I'm gonna go do that. So
that sucks though.
So I pulled into pits. Did that, and I was like tiptoeing around the rest of the lap, right? Like trying to stay out of people's way and making sure like I just put on a new set of tires. The main thing I was trying to do was get the first heat cycle into these tires for the next day. I was trying to heat cycle the tires. So, but also at the same time, be very careful. Don't lock the brakes up. Don't do anything stupid. So I came off the track into the pits, turned the car off, let it sit for like 10 seconds, turned the car back on. And all the codes went away. I was like, okay, so I drove down the pit lane. They released me back out. I got like 2 turns in, and the same thing happened. It all came back on, and I was like, crap. I was like, well, I need to heat cycle these tires. So I basically drove around at a 6 or 7 tenths pace while really extending my braking zones to make sure that I wasn't causing any issues with the ABS. And the car was still running fine, still had full power, but just so I had an open diff. The differential wasn't working. So on these M4s, you have an electronic diff, and then the ABS wasn't working, but everything else was fine. So I tried to get a little bit of heat into the tires. Came off the track after like 2 laps. Didn't have any issues. There were very few people out on track anyway, and so was trying to figure out what was going on. I went and looked at my data. Pulled some codes and went and looked at my data. And so what I found was in the codes, it said something about like rough road surface detected, and then right rear wheel speed sensor malfunction. So I was like, huh.
And then I went and looked. Boot was on the right rear.
Yeah, this right rear axle boot, and now I've got a wheel speed sensor that's acting up. So I went and actually looked at my data. So one of the cool things I'll shout out, I've got an AIM Solo 2 DL, so I've got the data log actually hooked up into the CAN bus system. So I just wanted to verify before I start like trying to figure out what's going on. Spend a little bit of time, see if I can verify maybe what the issue is. Pulled up the aim data, and I looked at each of the 4 independent wheel speeds, and halfway through the lap, the right rear wheel speed sensor just like, goes to zero. Goes to zero. Yeah, just goes to zero. All the others are still working, but the it was evident, right rear wheel speed sensor gone. So I was like, okay, well that's weird. So ended up pulling it off, and I think what had happened is that part of the boot, I think it was maybe part of the tape or part of the boot, had sort of come loose, and I think was, as the boot was spinning, was flapping and hitting the wheel speed, the outer covering of the wheel speed sensor, of the right wheel speed sensor. And it had chafed through the outer coating of the wheel speed sensor. And so I think what had happened is that you could actually see the copper wires, and they had just like grounded out, right? Yeah. Or what? I'm not an electrician, I don't know, but you could see wires. I was like, okay, wires bad.
Copper wire even worse.
Yes. And so I was like, oh, like I don't think I can just tape this up and be good to go. So I start getting on the internets trying to find a replacement. No replacement in Bowling Green. The closest one was at an AutoZone in Nashville, which was actually the AutoZone that I used to go to where I used to live in Nashville. So, me and my wife lived in a townhouse, and it was about 3 miles from this AutoZone, and I used to go there. But they're like one of those bigger AutoZones that has like a distribution place attached to it. So they tend to have more parts. So I ended up, shout out to my brother, John. I talked to him that morning. I called them just to verify that they had it. They did. I said, please put it on hold. They only had one. It was the only auto parts store. I mean, I called Advance. I looked at O'Reilly, Napa. I called the BMW dealership that was there in Bowling Green. Nobody had one. This was the closest one for like 100 miles. So he ended up going to the AutoZone, getting it, and then he started driving up from Nashville. I started driving down from Bowling Green Friday morning. And so we met just outside of Nashville because he had to deal with like 45 minutes worth of traffic, and like 45 minutes worth of driving from Bowling Green to me, for me, basically got me close to Nashville. So, so ended up getting the new wheel speed sensor, plugged it in, no issues, zip tied it up out of the way, and basically the rest of the weekend was fault free.
Nice.
From a mechanical standpoint.
To recap it for this, right? So this event was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yes. Yep.
So that's a big. I just want to clarify that for the listeners here. It was 4 whole days that you're competing, and you're going at it, right? So that's a lot of abuse and a lot of time on track that you're getting. And like in the case of Kilgore here, right? So had an issue and then had to resolve his issue, and then you still have to get the car up, and then as a driver you have to repair the car, and then you have to go drive the car.
Yeah,
it's a lot. It's a lot.
It is. And with the way that Time Trials Nationals is set up, right? It's supposed to be a first segment Thursday, Friday. Saturday, the course is split into 2, so you have an east course and a west course. East course, maybe the east course you run in the morning, that counts for segment number 2. West course you run in the afternoon, that counts for segment number 3. And then Sunday you run the full course again, that counts for segment number 4. So that means that basically you have to have your car in condition to run Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Now, what ultimately ended up happening is we ended up getting rain Saturday morning, which kind of came out of nowhere. People weren't really, none of us were really expecting it. The forecast wasn't really showing it. It was maybe showing some potential, but there was just like one freak shower that came right over the track, and it rained out the Saturday morning sessions. And so because you had so many competitors, they weren't really able to get everybody onto the 2 different courses with same track conditions. And so they said, well, to be fair to everybody, right? We don't want to have some people running in the rain, some people running in the dry, because that's just not really fair. And so not only overall, but also for people in class, because they weren't dividing people up for the segments on class. They were still running people by times.
And that's really cool of them, honestly, because you could have just said, these are the rules, this is how we're doing it. I don't care if it rains. That's something you have to deal with. Really cool by the organizers of really recognizing the deficit that they would put, people into, and being smart enough to say, we're not going to do this. This is gonna make this a mockery. So let's just make this right. They wanted to be fair. Yeah. Exactly. So really, really cool on them for being, because it's hard to take your well-planned organizational event and then go, by the way, all that stuff we just planned, scrub it, we're just going to this. So pretty cool that they were able to do that.
So Saturday afternoon ended up turning into, and it dried out pretty quickly. Saturday afternoon ended up turning into a couple sessions. So basically we went from 4 segments down to 2 segments. We were going to have Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday, which I'll tell you, by Sunday, that was a lot of track time on the same track. And you're trying to find, time here and there. And it's one thing, right? You're also on a 23 turn course. It's just a lot of mental.
It's over 2 minutes a lap, which that's a big lap. I mean, there's a lot of tracks across the U.S. that are, closer to the 1 minute barrier than tracks that are over a 2 minute barrier. So really it's a lot to learn, a lot to do, and a lot of endurance needed by the drivers.
Yeah, for sure. So I ended up so the first day I think I ended up setting a 216.3 or 4
0.3
which 0.3 216.3. So super happy with that. Picked up half a tenth. And then so Saturday ran a little bit more, ended up getting into the 15s Saturday afternoon. So I was super happy with that. And then Sunday morning, it just sort of came out of nowhere, right? I ended up running really well. First session ended up with a 2:14.9. So nearly 2 seconds faster than what I did the year before. And I was stoked. Which it was really funny. Eventually, I'll put the video up on YouTube. As I'm coming out of the last corner, so I have my aim solo set up to where it's showing me my predictive time, and throughout the weekend, the solo would be maybe about a tenth faster than what was actually being recorded in the official times, right? So I might show a 2:15.2. And then what I would see on the official times is a 2:15.3. And part of that is actually, as you cross the start finish, they actually have one of those LED boards set up that'll show you your time.
Oh, cool.
Which is super cool. So as I'm coming around the last corner, my predictive time is showing a 2:14.9. And so as I'm in the course, and I'm sure people have done this before, or as I'm in the car, going down the straight, I'm like, come on, go, go, go. Audibly yelling to the car, come on. And and then I was hoping, right, I saw 2:14.9, and I was like, please, don't I don't want an official time of a 15.0, right? I need a 14.9. And as I came across the start finish, it popped up with a 2:14.9, and definitely let out some audible cheers and yells and some fist pumps. And so I was super stoked with that. I still ended up 4th in my class, which was disappointing. Corvette in 1st, Corvette in 2nd, and Jager. Can you maybe guess what was in 3rd?
Well, I mean, it could be a Corvette or it could be a Supra.
Maybe. Corvette or Supra? It was a Corvette. Yeah, so Corvette clean sweep of 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. But with that being said, there were a lot of BMWs in the class. I was the fastest BMW in my class, and I think I might have been the fastest BMW overall at the event. So again, trying to find wins wherever I can. I was 23rd overall, 23rd out of 100, and what we said, 196 entrants.
Yeah.
So I can't be too sad. It's a bit of mixed emotions. I really wanted to podium in my class, but it's just a stacked class. I'm super happy with the time I ran, Super happy where I ended up overall. Just a little disappointed that I couldn't get on the podium in my own class, but not a huge deal. I will also say this. They also ran the Ultimate Track Car Challenge at the event as well. So you could have your times for Time Trial Nationals also count for the Ultimate Track Car Challenge. And I did, we can see here, boom.
Nice.
See if I can show that. Fastest BMW for the Ultimate Track Car Challenge. Whoop, whoop.
Nice.
Presented by Grassroots Motorsports and Beamer World.
That's pretty cool.
So, can't complain.
And
overall, it was a great
showing
weekend.
on the stats here. I mean, like you said, 23rd out of 196, and here I'll share this really quickly so people that are on the YouTube can see one of the interesting factoids here, like we were just talking about, right? So you got 2015 BMW M4 for Kilgore, a Mustang, Corvette, GR86, kind of surprising. 911, Corvette,
Zyra.
Corvette, Supra, Corvette, Supra. The odd duck of the world, Steve Luca here in his 2020 Mustang GT500, and we'll talk about the winners and losers as an overall. I think I was just trying to really prove a point and just saying this out loud of the Corvettes and the Supras as a whole, when you're talking about time attack, time trials, any of those things, I'm just going to say it, like, they are running rampant in time attack and that comes down, and I think me and you have talked about it, off podcast, but it's like the concept of everything that comes around in terms of the statistics of these cars in these classes. I think rule sets need to be altered in some sort of way to make it a little bit more competitive for some of the other cars. Now, I will say from an organizer's perspective, you could go down the path of like, well, it's easier to get these cars modified at X level to make it so that they can compete, so on and so forth. So that's why people do it. But I'm just going to say maybe it's something that, these rule setters need to take in account for and start saying, like, maybe not, I don't want to say exclude, because I don't want to see specific cars being excluded, but to even it out a little bit. I mean, you could easily do something where you go down a weird path of saying, hey, if you're running a Supra or you're running a Corvette, you get, a tire penalty. Instead of running
ballast, I don't know, yeah, something,
something, because, man, it just seems like they are the car to beat. And maybe, at the end of the day, there's a 99 Honda Civic in the P2 spot. So maybe it's
Jimmy
just...
Rout.
Yeah, Jimmy Rout. I mean, maybe it's just a situation where people aren't building their cars like they should. And I'm speaking all sorts of BS and I should just shut up. But that's just, something I'm looking at and seeing and I'm going, what the heck? But,
well, I do. Let me make this one. I don't want to make claims that I don't deserve. As you were sitting there with the results up, I did forget me and John. I think he pronounces his name
Rotor.
Rotor Rider.
I forgot. Yeah, he's there 21st.
Super cool guy. We chat all the time. He's got a nice BMW M2. Very similar spec to mine in terms of what we have with the MCS suspensions, brakes, tires, etc. But that dude can also just wheel a car. And so he's actually, I think, a 10th faster ultimately. He did a 214.8. I did a 214.9. He was actually in a class up because he had SBL control arms in, and he was like, I don't want to take him out. I'm going to move a class up. And I said, I've got SBL control arms in. I'm going to take him out and stay in the class down. So give all credit to John and the M2. Sorry, man, didn't mean to take the claim for fastest BMW. Now, he did not participate in the Ultimate Track Car Challenge, which I did. So that's how I ended up with the trophy. So a bunch of BMWs there. Again, it was a great time. Super happy with how it turned out. The car stayed in one piece. Ended up running much faster. and there's still some more room for modification in my car that could make me faster to try and chase down Mark Sarcevich and Nick Hendricks and now Chris Wheelock, all of them in the Corvettes. I will say this, and I think to your point of what are some ways to even out some of the inherent performance benefits of Corvettes and Supras. At least with the Corvettes, often what happens is, and I think that this is, other than Global Time Attack, we'll take Global Time Attack out of it, at least for the classes I'm running in with Tuner and SCCA and Street GT, you can run a 315 tire, and we've talked about this on other episodes. You can run a 315 tire. The real difference is not just the size of tire you can fit on the car, but the real difference with the Corvettes versus the BMWs or even the Supras to a degree is those Corvettes can easily fit 12 or 13-inch rims, right? And so I think that may be something that I may actually float out to Grid Life, is to say for Street GT, if you're going to run an aftermarket wheel, you've got to limit it to maybe an 11-inch wheel, because you could still run technically a 315 on an 11-inch wheel, but that would basically allow for a more even playing field. The Corvettes can't run their 12 or 13-inch wheels. They're going to be to an 11-inch wheel. I would be on an 11-inch wheel, and the BMW Supra can run an 11-inch wheel. So then you're at least putting everyone on the same wheel diameter, and then people can pick and choose what size tires they want to run. Do they want to run a 315, or do they want to run like a 295 on the same wheel? And that may be dependent on what the wheel likes, or what the tire likes. Does the tire like a little more stretch? Does it handle sort of rolling over the rim a little bit more? Who knows? You kind of have to choose what you want. But
see, I go the complete opposite. I just go complete into the balls to the wall situation of screw letting them run a 315, knock it down to a 295. Level the playing field in that regard, because it's like you said. It's really hard to find a car that can fit a 315 easily. So why not just level the playing field in terms of what people can run? But that's my thing. And some other stuff we'll cover here to kind of round us out at the good old-fashioned winners and losers. So we'll look at new track records because, well, time attack, time trials, doesn't matter. It all matters about records. So unlimited class, Steve Luca in that Ford Mustang GT500 gets a new track record in unlimited with a 201.983. I'm not gonna lie, I really want to see this car in person. Like, I would absolutely love if Steve brought this thing out to like finals so we could really see what this thing can do in a track that I'm more understanding of. But I think he already has kind of closed down shop for the year to build up for next year. So
really hope to see him at Super Lap Battle. I think they were supposed to come maybe last year, but they didn't quite have the car ready.
So and I really wish I could have seen that. Although he parked in like the back 40 and didn't have a garage spot. Like, we were looking for him, and I was looking for a specific car. And so when I didn't see that car and I saw another Mustang, it got confusing. Never ended up talking to him. One of those weird things. I don't know why. So I'm going to butcher the crap out of DJ's name. So I'm just going to say DJ in a Chevy Corvette. Alessandrini.
Alessandrini.
So Max 2 set a sweet lap of 2 minutes 9 seconds. With that's a quick lap in Max 2. That is
209.3 in Max 2, and a guess what kind of car?
The Corvette Life.
Maybe.
And we're just gonna say this out loud. There was 5 new records set by Corvettes.
Yes.
Now I will give Hondas some credit here too, because they also set 2 records as well, with a Honda CRX with Andy Hollis running a 216 379 in Max 5, and John Laughlin in a Honda Civic with a 218 845 in Sport 3. So I mean, and I'm gonna throw this out there because Mike King in an MX5 ran a 227 987 in the CSX class. just cool to see an MX-5 setting a record out there, having a good time. It's hard, man. In time attack time trials, when you're talking about setting records, it's very, very, very hard to do in an MX-5. And last but not least, we got Ryan Matthews in a Chevy Corvette with a 210 in Turner 1. And we also have Mark
Sarsevich. Yep, I know.
Sarsevich.
It's a hard one.
We got a Sarsevich in a Chevy Corvette as well with a 212.934 in Turner 2. And again, Sport 1, another Corvette, Jacob Glover with a 211.499. And last but not least, we got two more. We got Michael DeRigino in a Chevy Corvette with a 215.561. And last but not least, Trevor Kingland in a Ford Mustang with a 222.030 in CSM class. Again, 5 Corvettes setting records, and this is why we're kind of tipping that weird scale of saying maybe we should be taking a look at the rules a little bit and understanding what makes sense. Because I look at it too, and I go, from the aspects of Turner 1 to Turner 2 to
Tuner.
Sport 1.
There's no R. Tuner.
Yeah, I'm reading, and it's just missing the R, so I say Turner. Tuner, yep. And so
you've probably been looking at Turner Dobbins' name all week.
And so it's just one of those situations of, I'm looking at the times and I'm going, maybe we should find a more disparaging way to make the rules into something different. But just a concept, just an idea. So, any last closing words for the good old fashioned TT Nats?
I will say this, and I think, this is, it's interesting, and sometimes you just have to tip your hat, like it is what it is. But I was trying to look and see if I could figure it out real quick. I'm just gonna have to go off my memory here, but right, if you're looking at the records, DJ Alessandrini in a Max 2 Corvette. I believe that was a C5 Corvette. Ryan Matthews, I think, is a C6 or C7 Corvette. Mark Sarsevich is in a C5 Corvette. Sport 1 for Jacob Glover, that was a new C8 Corvette. That might have even been a C8 Z06, but I'm not entirely sure. But it is a new C8 Corvette. Michael D. Gregorio, Michael D. Gregorio, man. Michael,
he's got 2004.
We'll call him Michael D. Yeah. So I think his was a C5 or C6. So
whatever a 2004 is.
Yeah, so I think that's a C5. But just to the point, right? It's not that there's just one year of the Corvette that was just phenomenal, and that's what everybody is using. But the Corvettes are just big engines with fairly big power, right? You're still looking at 400 or 500 horsepower ish, 350, 400 or 500 horsepower.
Yeah,
light chassis and big tires, right? You can always fit more tire up under that car.
I think that's the thing that really gets me the most is the big tire that you can throw in there.
Yeah, and it is what it is. I'm going to continue the good fight to try and take them down. But
it'd be interesting to go back and look through the results to understand how many Corvettes you also beat as well.
That's right, exactly.
But we won't
like those types of numbers.
We won't go into that right now. So
anyway,
as an overall, I think TT Nats was a really cool event. Tons of participation, and I think that's probably my biggest thing. They're obviously doing something very, very right to get 196 people to show up at this event. Ultimate Street Car Challenge is also a part of that as well, and making sure that they get enough people out there to have a good time. So I'm not arguing or saying anything negative about this event. It was huge. You got to take part in it. You had a good time with it.
Yeah, it was a good way to end the season for me. Of course, the best thing is the car is still in one piece. No major issues this year, and I learned a ton, including being able to go to 5 new tracks across the U.S., CMP, Coda, Gingerman, Mid-Ohio, and Laguna. That's a pretty good list of tracks to be able to go to, so I am definitely not complaining. Plenty of things to do in the off-season. Definitely some changes, trying to make the car faster, try and get a bit more competitive. Definitely need to work on my own driving as well. But overall, this year, it was a good year. That'll do it for this episode. We hope you all have enjoyed our discussion and review of the SCCA TT Nationals event. Be sure and check us out on Instagram. You can find us at Perfect Lap Podcast. You can email the show at maximumattack@perfectlappodcast.com. That is maximum attack, all one word, at perfectlappodcast.com. Obviously, we're on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify as well as Apple Podcast. So we hope you guys are having a great time, because Jager and I are definitely enjoying making these episodes and the content. However, don't go anywhere, because our next episode is going to be coming right up after this, and we will preview the Global Time Attack Finals at Buttonwillow.